Um, Again, welcome everyone. I hope you're all doing well. The session today is the first event of the monthly speaker sessions hosted by the Pacific Inclusive Education Research and Resources Inclusive Gifted Education Center. The Inclusive Gifted Education Center is managed by the faculty and staff at the Center on Disability Studies at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, with funding provided by the U.S. Department of Education Gifted and Talented Education Program. The overarching goal of our center is to nurture untapped talents through inclusive practices. As part of our ongoing efforts, in February this year, we hosted a symposium in Honolulu. Many of you have attended this symposium as well. And this event focused on supporting the post-secondary transition on neurodivergent students. The subsequent virtual monthly sessions we are starting off today are aimed at raising people's awareness of issues related to neurodiversity and twice exceptionality. Each session will offer knowledge and perspectives of a well-known, recognized speaker in the area of inclusion, neurodiversity, and education. For today's event, I'm delighted to welcome our speaker, Mr. Joshua Crafford, who will present a topic on neurodivergence and the importance of feeling safe. Joshua is a neurodiversity and learning strategist thought leader. He has dedicated his life to learning how to learn. He spearheaded the design of multiple international learning and development departments in Fortune 200 companies. Joshua is also a keynote speaker and strategic partner with multiple universities on topics of neurodiversity and inclusion. He holds a master's degree in design management and has dyslexia, ADHD, dyscalculia, and anxiety. After Joshua presents the topic, the last part of the session will be dedicated to any comments and questions you might have. And at the very end, I will also post a link in the chat box for you to complete a short post-evaluation survey. You are more than welcome to use a chat throughout the session. We will try to follow and track your comments and feedback in the chat box, and we will discuss them in the last part after Joshua's presentation. I suggest we start. Joshua, thank you very much for joining us today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's interesting. I'm facing the window and the sun is going down, so it's starting to get a little bit darker. So I'm trying to put my desk light on, which I know it's not the same there for you. So I appreciate all the coordination as well. So hello, everybody. My name is Joshua Crafford. So thank you for the introduction. One of the things I want to talk about are the neurodivergent elephants hiding at your organization. Because believe it or not, they're all around us and they're even on this call. Yeah. So when we talk about neurodiversity and inclusion, one of the things that we want to make sure is we're thinking about individuals' safety. And safety is a lot about mental health as well as career and their position. So I want to bring a little bit different perspective today that might not usually be talked about, is why a lot of us mask and hide that we're neurodivergent, because 10 to 20% of your workforce is hiding genius level talent. And Polly, I loved it when you said we want to tap into the talent of people, because that's part of what we'll be covering today to make sure people feel safe. One of the things I also want to do is make sure that we do cover what neurodiversity is, right? So neurodiversity is the term that talks about everyone, because everyone's brain is wired differently. Based on some people's wiring, we encounter barriers in things like school, work, and life. And there's two big buckets that everybody falls into. One is neurotypical, where your cognitive function is able to meet society's expectations, because that's about 80% of the population. So they are the ones that kind of who the world is built by, therefore it's who it's built for. The other 20% of us are neurodivergent, so our brains work differently from the status quo. And we're the ones that usually encounter challenges in the way that the world is typically structured. And not that we're trying to be challengers, but those challenges kind of make it look like we're challenging the status quo when we're just trying to fit in with how our brain works. One of the universities that I work with is UConn, University of Connecticut, their Center for Neurodiversity, and their mission is very similar to yours, is that 30 to 40% of neurodivergent adults who are able to work can't get hired because we don't fit into that neurotypical status quo. This usually comes up on resumes and definitely in interviews. So one of the questions that I'd like you to ask with your organization or yourself, wherever you sit, is how successful is your company with neurodiversity, right? The answer to this that you should hope to obtain is 7. 7% of the people at your organization should be comfortable to identify as having a disability. Now, they don't have to say specifically that I'm neurodivergent versus other disabilities, but there's going to be a big pocket of people within that self-identify that would be neurodivergent. We'll get into why 7 is kind of that magic number in a little bit. And to have a deeper understanding of safety around neurodiversity, I want to start with another question. What do you want to be when you grow up? Think back to when you were 7 years old and just an innocent little second grader, and you were asked this question. What do you want to be when you grow up? Now, lots of different ways that it could go. Some people might think a scientist or a poet, a gold medal Olympian, maybe even a president, maybe a tech mogul and billionaire, or an actor, producer, director, or the creator of a beloved children's franchise, or an artist. Now, let me ask you one thing. If you want to pop it into chat, great. What's one thing that all of these people have in common? And there's no wrong answer and there's no judgment. So please feel free to throw something in the chat of something that you think. You don't have to know it. What is something that everybody here has in common? I'll give you one answer. They're all neurodivergent, believe it or not. And they're all very accomplished, very successful in their own ways. This is some of that genius level talent that you could tap into in your organizations if people feel safe to share how creative they are. But I want to take a step back and go back to the safety part, because if you're not dyslexic, this is a dyslexic simulation. So try to read through this as I'm talking to you. And now imagine every email that you get being this difficult to read and comprehend, and every book that you get being this challenging. Once again, we have challenges. We're not trying to be challengers. And I'll share my story with you so that you understand the story of one neurodivergent person. And every neurodivergent person's story is different and everybody's experience is different, but I'm going to share mine with you so that you at least have a different perspective. And I'm, like I said, at the end, I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you have. So when I was 7 years old and I was asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? My answer was Jacques Cousteau. I wanted to swim in the ocean with the dolphins and the whales. But I'm severely dyslexic, and this is what reading is like for me. And when I was giving a neurotypical standardized test that I could not pass at all, the State Department of Education called my parents into the school and gave me a bunch of tests, but they pulled my parents into one room and I sat in the adjacent room with a teacher as they were giving the results to my parents. And a lot of it I couldn't understand, but I could hear them through the door. And the final summary of what they told my parents, I did understand clearly, because they said, Josh might not graduate high school and don't count on college. And then the next thing that I heard was my mom break down and cry. And in her tears, my hopes and dreams of what do you want to be when you grow up were washed away, because I knew that you needed to go to school in order to be successful. Now, how we learn Confucius got it right about 2,500 years ago. He said, I hear and I forget, I see and I remember, I do and I understand. And neuroscience today can kind of back that up. And these are some rounded off numbers, but it fits. Now you think about typical schooling and the standardized tests that they gave me, and a lot of that is based on reading, hearing, and seeing to set up my entire future. But what they leave out in a lot of schools is the doing, where we have those deep discussions, we tie things back to personal experience, and we do the teach back to others. So what this leads to is what we call masking. So masking for me was going from an innocent second grader who did not want to be called dumb and definitely did not want to be bullied. How I would hide my neurodivergence is I would be a class clown. But that has to evolve over time. So then I become a practical joking punk. And to try and show I was too cool to care, I even loved my ripped jean shorts. But all of that leads to psychological safety and the psychological impact of living in a neurotypical oriented world. Right? So I already kind of showed a little bit about masking and what that is and having to fit in so you don't get teased and bullied. And there's also imposter syndrome where you have self-doubt, where if you do accomplish something, you're like, oh, I'm not supposed to be smart. I was told I'm not smart. I was told that I'm broken or there's something wrong with me. So can I get a degree? I don't know. And there's a cost emotionally and physically draining. Now, if you look at the picture of the tree, you might notice something up against the tree. And Einstein said, if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will spend its whole life thinking that it's stupid, right? And with people, the cost comes at mental wellness, self-doubt, shame, and anxiety. And if you are a business owner, then there's loss in productivity, sick days, and turnover. And backfilling an empty position costs anywhere between 50% and 200% of that person's annual salary, depending on how experienced and tenured and specialized that they are. So labels and stigmas, a lot of times people want to know what different types of neurodiversity there is. So it comes in a lot of different types. The ones you'll hear most often are dyslexia, autism, ADHD, dyscalculia, dysgraphia, Tourette's syndrome, OCD, and there's others. The most common in this order are dyslexia, ADHD, and autism. And generally, if you have one, it brings a friend to the party. Just like I said, I have dyslexia, ADHD, dyscalculia, and high anxiety. And I'm also introverted, so doing this type of stuff is like, whoo, but it's worth it. So where I came from, I was born and raised in Maine, Rockland, Maine. It's a sleepy little small town. It's a lobstering village. It's the lobster capital of the world. And only about 30% of the students that graduate go off to college anyway. So I figured, okay, I'm just going to be a lobsterman like a lot of my other friends are. And I was already that practical joking punk. So my high school transcript, and this is literally my high school transcript, in the 9th grade, if you equate my grades on the right to a GPA, it's a 1.9, right? It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. I gave power to that voice in the 2nd grade that said, don't even bother. And I hung out with other kids that weren't planning on graduating and were getting expelled. I was a practical joking punk. My favorite teacher was Mr. Holden, and he was a practical joker himself. And this isn't the real Mr. Holden. It's just a picture, different picture. But the expression is because on April Fool's Day, one practical joker to another, I successfully superglued him to his stool in front of my entire science class. Lucky for Mr. Holden, it was the last period of the day. So he only had to wait for that period to get over and people to leave school to figure out how to separate himself from the school. Now he had a night to think about it. So the next day, after the first class got out, all of the students from his class flooded into the hallway. It was a manhunt to find out who superglued Mr. Holden to his stool. When it came time for our class, we all took our seats. I anxiously took my seat. Mr. Holden came strutting in, and he was just said, "Congratulations, you are the coolest group of freshmen that I've ever met. As you can see on the board behind me are all of your names and 150 points of extra credit to whoever the first person is that turns in the culprit that superglued me to my stool yesterday." And I'm like, oh, I am in so much trouble. And then he continued and he said, "Now, none of you turned in and ratted out your peer. You've been protecting this person all day long. So are they as cool as you? Because if they don't come forward and turn themselves in the next 3 seconds, everybody here has detention." And I'm like, oh, crap. I'm sorry, Mr. Holden. I did it. And he looks at me and he's like, "Crafford, hallway now." And in that empty hallway, he gave me 2 options. And he put my fate into my own hands. But before he gave me those 2 options, he gave me the best gift ever. He reframed learnings to focus on my strengths. He said, if this was simply first period and someone turned me in, he would have easily expelled me. But as the day went on and no one turned you in, I started to wonder why. And then I realized you must have some leadership skills. And then I also figured out that you're the first student in 20 years to successfully prank me on April Fool's Day, and every year someone tries, and you're only a freshman, so you must have creativity skills as well. And then he gave me the 2 options. He said, option 1 is to take your creativity skill and your leadership skills and promise me you'll put them to good use, and promise me that you'll go to college. And at that time, I had 0 intention of going to college. So I said, so what's option number 2? And he looked me dead in the eye and he said, "Crafford, I expel your ass. You took it too far." I was like, whoa. It just got real. And I literally still get goosebumps today thinking back to it. So what I did, well, with option number 1, but I had to reframe my whole being as to who I'm hanging out with and how I study and other things. So what I did is I started to hang out with kids that weren't getting expelled and wanted to go to college. And my GPA went from a 1.9 to a 2.4. Now the magic, and this is why I'm a corporate learning leader today, is because of that other 50% of what Confucius taught us. Because in our study groups, my friends didn't judge me and they were okay with my rough questions. And they would help teach me back, and they would use examples and metaphors and tie it back to personal experiences several different ways so that I could learn the material, and my grades started to go up. Now, the beauty is I had to chase them down to do study groups at first. Then they started to come to me, because if you look at this bottom part of this 95% is what we teach others, their grades started to go way up because they had a very deep understanding of all the material by teaching me back. And my grades continued to go up. They went from a 2.4 to then a 3.1. Now, if you look at chemistry lab and the 2Ds, that's a completely different story altogether. We're not going to get into that. But this is the real Mr. Holden, and he was a hero to me. And he was a visionary and wise beyond his years because he was focusing on people's strengths and not their challenges. And now dyslexic thinking is a strength in the dictionary, and it's also a skill in LinkedIn. One of the other cool things, this is the real Mr. Holden, and this is my senior yearbook. And he signed it in the crease, as you can see, superglue. The other cool thing that he did is senior year, he asked all of us, how many of you are going to college? And a decent percentage of us raised our hands. And then he asked, where's everybody going? And it was Maine, New Hampshire, Massachusetts was probably the furthest. And he said, great. That means you're the smartest group of stupid people I've ever met. What? So we're like, what are you talking about? There's a bunch of us going to college. And he said, college is the one opportunity in your life to go anywhere that you've ever wanted to go in the world and go to school there for 4 years. And if they don't like it, you can transfer back. And at that moment, he gave me my second big epiphany and aha moment, because right after that class, I went to the guidance office and I looked up Hawaii, and that's where I went to school. So I went from Maine to Hawaii, and it was phenomenal. And so many rich Floridians and so many great people that I've met, including this lovely lady right here, who is now my wife, and we had a baby. And we continued to grow our family. So now we have 3 kids. And this is a picture back in Hawaii again. But because of Mr. Holden and focusing on our strengths, I was able to be successful. And I'm not a lobsterman in Rockland, Maine. And I get to partner with so many different great universities and organizations. And yeah, I'm neurodivergent, but I don't let it stop me because I focus on my strengths. And this is an example that shows running a neurodiversity workshop, as well hands-on. I was hoping to do in person in Hawaii in February, but I wasn't able to travel out there. Hopefully next year. Okay? So this is me and my story. But what's in it for you, right? We always want to know what's in it for me. So like I said, you have genius level talent hiding all these wonderful skills within your organization. The other cool thing is the World Economic Forum said up to 50% of all employees need to be reskilled in 2025. The reason why is because of artificial intelligence. The World Economic Forum also said that these are the top job skills of the future. And the reason there is because these are things that artificial intelligence cannot do. Now, another study matched up these skills to the top skills of neurodivergent people, and it was a perfect fit. Because if you look at the pictures of the people on the right and you look and think of analytical thinking, active learning, learning strategies, complex problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, originality, initiative, leadership, technology use, technology design and program, resilience, stress tolerance, flexibility, reason, problem solving, and ideation, these are all things that come naturally to someone that has been living in a world that wasn't always built for them, right? So I mentioned a number a little bit earlier, between 1 and 10. Can anybody guess what number I'm thinking of now, between 1 and 10? Yes, Isaac, thank you. Lucky number 7. So if you're not convinced yet, if you're an employer, of why you should hire neurodivergent people and create a neuro-inclusive environment and make it safe, if you work with the government at all and have any federal contracts, the government wants you to have a workforce that consists of at least 7% of people with disabilities. One of the companies that I work with and been working with since 2019, that was when I was very first comfortable coming out and sharing publicly, especially as a learning leader, that I had learning differences. That company was at a 4% self-identification rate. Today, they're at a 10% self-identification rate. And they do not have anybody dedicated to accessibility. I purely work with their employee resource groups. And they went from 4% to 10%. A lot of times I get asked, well, can't we just ask people, or why can't we ask people, or why don't people self-identify, or can't we just hire some neurodivergent people? And the answer is no. And it goes back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You first have to have an inclusive environment where people feel safe, or you're just going to hire a bunch of people in that are going to end up hiding and masking, because our first thing that we need as humans is to feel safe. So what we do and how we do that is we stop focusing on challenges, because that induces shame, self-doubt, and anxiety, and do what Mr. Holden did. Focus on strengths, which will then help the shame, self-doubt, and anxiety go to grace, self-confidence, or self-compassion and confidence. The way that we do that, and here's my ask of everybody, is to be a guide. It's not an overwhelming, you don't have to be a coach, you don't have to be a leader, you don't have to be a mentor. And this is to everybody. An inclusive environment, nobody has to self-identify. So if you're a guide to everyone, then everybody wins. Some examples of guides you might recognize. My favorite guide of all time, and if any of you know this person, please make an introduction. Miss Oprah Winfrey, right? But we don't have to be movie characters or Oprah. Like I said, to be a guide, we just focus on peace. Pick two. So identify strengths and point them out to people, anyone. People don't have to self-identify as being neurodivergent. Compliment and reinforce their strengths, listen and understand. And if you see a roadblock, just remove it. You don't have to say, can I help you? You just help them. Growth mindset, show empathy, empower, and inspire. Because when we know better, we do better. That's not my quote. Thank you, Maya Angelou. That is her quote. Now, an interesting thing is if 20% of the population is neurodivergent, how is it that 40% of self-made millionaires have dyslexia? Because when we are boxed in and have to live in that status quo, we don't like it. We take our genius level ideas and we go elsewhere and become our own employees or employers, or make millions of dollars for the companies that are inclusive. The other thing is, all of these people are also self-identified. You'll see a lot of actors there. Like I said, the skills, the top 10 job skills of the future identified by the World Economic Forum is because we live in a world that's not designed for us, so we have to become strong at those. You'll see that there's a ton of actors here, and if you think back to masking, masking is acting. So they were able to turn masking into a profession and become actors. And it's not just Hollywood that's figured this out. The CIA and the British Intelligence Agency actively hire dyslexics because of their skills. And here's the thing. If you are in cybersecurity at all, and you've ever turned away a neurodivergent person because they're not a good interviewer, who do you think the first person is that they're going to come back and hack? We'll be careful on that one. And it's not just the CIA and the British Intelligence Agency. NASA, take a guess. Like I said, no judgment, no wrong answers that you can throw in there. We don't have an exact number, but we know that it's above 50% of NASA employees have dyslexia for all the same reasons. I'm going to touch on a point again, and then we're going to play a little bit. No one should ever have to disclose in person or publicly, period. There are systems like Workday that can capture self-identification in an anonymous and safe way. And then it's usually only your chief HR, your chief diversity officer that has access to what whose names those are. And reasons why people should self-identify is because believe me, the company that I work for, when they went from 4% of people self-identifying to 10%, you're forced to listen to say, hey, we need to help. We need to make sure that there are accommodations so that we keep these people and we can get their genius to come out. Now, the great thing about being a corporate learning leader, and my master's degree was in design thinking and innovation, and my capstone class that I created was how to teach creative thinking skills. And this is when I worked at GE Capital. So I had a bunch of economists and engineers and everybody else that I had to teach creative thinking skills to. And my foundational ground rules in that, which then spilled over into our corporate culture, were no judgment. Because judgment is the #1 killer of creativity and sharing ideas. Yes, and is the most collaborative tool that I've ever come across, and I borrowed it from improv, because when you say yes and to someone's idea and you build on it, it removes the no, but I don't think that would work, or no, but finance wouldn't go for that. And then embracing rough and ugly, at least to start. You don't turn in a rough and ugly final project, but at least at the start of it, that's where your divergent thinking, it opens diversity of thought, iterations, MVPs. And if you don't believe me that rough and ugly works, remember, Picasso is neurodivergent. This is a Picasso painting, and it sold for over $100 million. Okay, if everybody has a pen and paper or a pen and marker, please go ahead and get that out. If you need to reach for it, please go ahead and do that. I want to do a little activity with you. we're going to put Confucius to the test on the hear, see, and do. Now remember, this is a judgment-free zone. There is no judgment. We're going to yes and we're going to embrace rough and ugly. What I'd like everybody to do, and if you have a marker, great. Here's 3 examples of squiggles. I want you to, I'll demonstrate here. Draw a big squiggle on your paper. Let's see if I can get that to show up. Draw a big squiggle. And then what I'd like you to do, just move my computer down, add an eye, a beak, a tail, and 2 feet. And what you'll do is you'll turn that squiggle into a bird. So just look at your squiggle and, oh, I've already got a beak. So an eye, there's a beak, 2 feet, and a tail, and voila, have a bird. Now I'm actually going to stop sharing because what I would love, stop screen sharing. What I would love for everybody to do change my view to gallery. If you can come off the camera or turn your camera on and share your squiggle bird, I would love to capture different people's squiggle birds. Love that. Yeah, this is great. I can see a bird in everybody's drawing. Thank you. All right, thank you for coming, sharing your screen and doing that. All right. That picked back up where it was. Okay, now here's the beautiful thing. This represents everybody's individual diversity of thought. This could be the next billion-dollar idea. This could be the cure for cancer. But a lot of times, if we do not have an inclusive environment, here's what happens. Someone has what they think is a really brilliant idea, and it's just like this big, right? It's just a little squiggle. They don't really put it out there into the corporate culture. Sorry, my screen doesn't show that well. They don't put it out there into the corporate culture as big and bold as they would as if they had an inclusive culture. So when you have an inclusive culture, it's not just neurodivergent people that win, everybody wins. All right. Pattern recognition was one of the top skills for hackers and for NASA. So we're going to play a little bit in pattern recognition. So in front of you are the numbers 1 through 54. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 30 seconds, and I want you to see how far you can get in numerical order. So you have to start with the number 1 and then go to number 2 and see how far you can get in identifying the numbers. Now, if you get stuck on a number, say you get stuck on number 7, you can't jump and skip number 8. You just stop there at 7. So in 30 seconds, see how far you can get. Ready, set, go. Five more seconds. And stop. All right. Go ahead and pop it in chat. How far did everybody get? Remember, no judgment. So even if you just got to number 3, that's great. All right, 7, 13, 12, 15, 13. All right, lots of teens. 22, 7. All right, awesome. Just the fact that you tried it and you put it in chat is a win. Now, I'm going to be a guide, and I'm going to share you some guidelines. Aha. So look, 1, 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6, number 7, number 8, number 9, and then it goes back up to 10, and that pattern repeats itself, right? Okay, let's do it again. Not the same one, different one. So I'm going to give you another 30 seconds. It's a new pattern. Here's the number 1. Here's the number 2. 30 seconds starts now. Go ahead. See how far you get. Five more seconds. And stop. All right. How far did we get? Pop it in the chat. This one could be a little bit trickier. All right. Starting off strong. 2024. Okay. Where did you guys go? That's great. 29. Maya, I think you're a natural pattern recognizer. Okay. The secret, if you didn't catch it, here we go. So 1 in that corner, 2 in that corner. Then we're going to jump down to the bottom left and then to the bottom right. And then all the 5s and 10s are in the middle. And then we go back top left, top right, bottom left, bottom right, back to the middle. All right. Think everybody's getting the hang of it. I'm going to reset my clock. I'm going to throw another pattern up. I'm not going to show you number 1 and number 2. As soon as I flip the screen, your 30 seconds starts. Ready, set, go. Five more seconds. And stop. All right, pop it in the chat. How far did everybody get? 34, 43. All right. 10 is great. I will take 10 any day. 30, 26, 26. Yeah. All right. Probably everybody caught the pattern on this one a little bit, right? So it goes around in a circle. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now here's the interesting thing. There's a pattern within the pattern, because if you look at the font and the size, they're all the same. When we do the second ring, 9, 10, all the fonts and the size of that second ring are also the same, and then the third ring and then the fourth ring. So just some fun pattern recognition. Now imagine if you did this your whole life, how good you would be at debunking code, cybersecurity, and other patterns that are all around us. Now in the workplace, because I lead learning and development, and it's a finance, I work for a financial institution, we are federally regulated, and we have to do annual compliance training, which is the bane of everybody's existence. We have to do about a dozen of them on all the different federal regulations. And every year there's a big percentage of people that are late in doing it, and we pretty much have to harass them in order for them to get it done. So leadership came to me and said, hey, you lead learning and development, you figure out a way to get people to do these, and where we are not like threatening them with their jobs to get it done. So I like games, so I gamified it. I went to our 8 senior leaders and I said, I want each of you to give me a mascot, and right above, like where above ravens and wolves would be their name, their last name. And every 2 weeks for 3 months leading up to our compliance due date, I would take a snapshot, send this out to the leaders. And the great thing was the amount of smack talk behind the scenes of them, especially if they jumped someone or someone couldn't catch up to them, was just fantastic. And then what they would do is they'd take this same snapshot and then they'd send it out to their team with their own individualized message saying, oh, we're so close to catching the Tigers, or hey, Eagles, we can't be in last place again, or the crows would be like, hey, those llamas better not pass us. We got to keep going. And for the very first time, not only did we finish 100% on time, we actually finished early. And people started saying, hey, instead of every other week, can you send just me one every week? So I ended up sending it out weekly, but it's just a simple thing like gamifying it. And this is how I use my strengths. Another example is just like at University of Hawaii, we have recruiting. So we work with local businesses. We work with a ton of different universities and colleges to recruit students from to go into early career programs. And one of our chief officers went back to their alma mater to recruit, and they showed up with the 25-page PowerPoint, and no one showed up because no one wanted to sit in an audience and listen to a 25-page PowerPoint. One of my good friends, we were having lunch together, and he was telling me about this, and he said the chief officer was really upset, and he said it can never happen again, but he still wants to use this information to recruit students. So I asked, well, what are other companies doing? And he said, some were doing mini golf, some were doing basketball tournaments, some were brought in food. One company even brought in a petting zoo. And so I said, give me a month. And we built out an escape room where we took that same information. You can see some of the PowerPoints on the wall over here about our company that we wanted to share with the students, and we turned it into clues for them to unlock these boxes or to escape the tent that this one started off locked in. But we were able to put this into a big container where we could put it in the trunk of a car and drive it from university to university with all the surrounding ones around us, and everybody loved it. And I'll end with this, and then we'll get into Q&A. Thank you again, Maya Angelou. When you know better, do better. And there's tons of training, wonderful trainings and workshops that the Center of Disabilities, University of Hawaii Manoa offers. I also made a documentary with a couple of friends who also have dyslexia and ADHD. The longer one is called Blessed with Dyslexia. The shorter one is Neurodiversity at Work. They're free on YouTube. Not trying to make money off it, just trying to share the message and the stories. With that, I would love to hear any questions that you have. Thank you, Isaac. I can see it. Thank you all for participating and putting your comments in chat, coming off of, sharing your screen, putting your squiggle birds up there.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Joshua, for this presentation. So like Joshua mentioned, everyone is now welcome to ask any question that you have or comment or anything. You can unmute yourself and go ahead. You can also post any comments or questions in the chat box if that works better.
Yeah, I have a comment. I think it's sometimes hard for people to self-identify as neurodiverse, or even, just to explain to people that you've got an issue. I mean, I started trying to tell people at my workplace over a decade ago that I had dyslexia and dyscalculia and that I had all kinds of things. And the first response I got from a colleague was, don't tell anybody that.
Yep.
And that was actually a couple different people told me that. I was like, what?
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that that's what the culture was. And I didn't share until 2019 because that was my culture as well. And Kimberly, thank you so much for sharing that with us today.
Well, the nice thing about it is that I just ignored them and I went ahead because, neurodiverse, right? And I went ahead and I told my students, and I started telling every single class of students in my self-introduction about my challenges and what that meant. And because I was teaching pre-college students and had for like decades, I've taught pre-college students, I started having students coming up to me saying, "Oh, I am too. And now I feel like I can learn from you." And I started getting just amazing numbers of students passing and transferring up into regular college and university. So, yeah, it was, I'm like, okay, y'all colleagues don't want to know, but my students do, so.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And we start off small. Like I started sharing with my friends on saying, hey, can you proofread this email before I send it out to 2,000 people? And so you start off sharing where you're comfortable. The other thing why I made the documentary is literally so that people can share my story and my two other friends that are on the documentary, so that, and everybody's experience with neurodiversity is different. One of the things that I do say is no one should ever have to share publicly, because when we create an inclusive environment for everybody, then the neurodivergent people win as well as the neurotypical people win. So all of my courses are highly visual, very few words on the page, similarly to how I took all of you through this. And this was short. So if it was longer, we do breakout sessions where we would be able to talk in smaller groups. So the way that I teach everybody, neurodivergent people are able to have those conversations, and it's not just memorization, it's not just reading, it's not just listening. So it goes back to Confucius and really being able to break down the information as well as consume the information in different ways. The other thing is, literally when we were in person, I would have fidget toys. And even right now, like I have fidget toys at my desk. I'm looking for a couple. Even in conference rooms, I would bring in fidget toys and I would allow people to play with them, because active hands, active minds. So thank you. I do want to hit on a couple of other of these. I did see a few words about 2E, twice exceptional. So my understanding, I don't have a PhD in this or anything. If someone is smart enough to get into college or get hired into a company without having to share that they're neurodivergent, so they weren't hired because they're in part of a special program, then they are smart enough to how to figure out how to navigate in a world that wasn't designed for them. And that 2E is twice exceptional. They're exceptionally smart and gifted. So I would go back to that group of, the top 10 job skills of the future, as well as that second exceptional is they have some form of neurodiversity that they have to overcome, whether it's reading and dyslexia, or it's math and dyscalculia, or it's something else. So that's just high level. I'm an example of a 2E, right? So I have learning disabilities, but I was also able to be successful. Hopefully that helps. Claudia, any others that?
Yes, we do have another question from Malia, who asks, are there some basic strategies for educators and parents to help a student or child find their hidden genius?
Yeah, if you've heard of a flow state, great question, by the way. If you've heard of a flow state of what, whether it's yourself or your child or someone else, where someone just loses themselves. My son does this all the time, and we've had conversations with his teachers, the assignments that he doesn't like, he turns them in late or they're not completely finished. The assignments that he does like, he spends 4 hours on something that, because he loves it, that he should have only spent 30 minutes on. So it is kind of that balance of finding that flow state and what it is that you really like, what comes naturally to you, and trying to incorporate that into other areas. One of the parents I recently talked to, their son loves Star Wars, and he doesn't read. He's very severely dyslexic, but they watch Star Wars with the closed captions on, and he reads the closed captions. They turn the volume down low. They can still hear things, but they turn the volume down low so that it encourages them to read. But then they also use metaphors that tie things back to Star Wars, and their son is participatory. A lot of neurodivergents love just different stimulations and being active, and that's why, you know, the hand toys. It's also novelty. So if you find something that they like Star Wars and novelty, try it back to them. A lot of people, Marvel, you could tie a lot of learnings back to Marvel or to sports or to surfing. You know, it's finding that and tying it back. The other thing is, like I have here on my PowerPoints, there's not a lot of words. It's a lot of pictures. Visuals help. The stories, the meanings behind it help. The activities, like doing this in pattern recognition. You know, you gamify as many things as you can to keep people active. And less reading, more talking seems to help. Great. Another question?
Thank you. Yes, and then we have Susan, who is asking if you can please discuss the differences between the terms ASD, neurodiversity, and neurodivergence.
Yeah, so ASD is part of the autism spectrum. I can't get into that more than it's, you know, one type of neurodivergence. So this goes back to, I'm going to see if I can get to this slide here. This is where, you know, ignore my rough and ugly. I like share my screen. So neurodiversity is everyone. Neurotypical is that status quo. Neurodivergent are the 20% of people that have the challenges living in a neurotypical world. So it's a quick explanation, but just in case there's other questions, I want to be able to get to those too.
I don't see any other questions, but let me see again in the chat box.
I think there might be one Katie asked earlier. All right, as an instructor, where are some resources we can go to think about ways to create more inclusive classrooms activities? So I do a lot of partnering with UConn Center for Neurodiversity. I think they have some different resources out there. They also partner with 75 different universities. IDA, International Dyslexia Association, might have some things out there. For ADHD, there's a book. I don't know the author or anything, but it's called, I have it downstairs. It's called Thriving with Dyslexia. No, I'm sorry, Thriving with ADHD. And it has a picture of kind of like a maze. That's really good because what it does is there's like 5 different types of ADHD. And in the first half, it's quizzes, a little 10 question quiz that you take yourself to see if you have the different types of ADHD. And then the back half is how to accommodate for each different type of ADHD. And that's called Thriving. Thriving with adult ADHD. Okay, that's it. And then, like I said, I have these in the classroom. You can go on Amazon and get a box with fidget toys that has, you know, these stretchy things. It has these. You can get a box of 60 fidget toys for, you know, $15. And I put them out and I allow people to grab one and play with it for the day. And, you know, please, if you like it enough to keep it, bring it back so I don't have to keep buying them all the time. Or have one yourself, because they don't really make much noise. People are going to be respectful with them. But it really helps. And once again, no one has to self-identify whether you're neurodivergent or not. Neurotypical people like playing with toys too. And if kinesthetic learning, it helps activate different parts of your brain just to have something in your hand and touching this. The best thing about having this in your hand is you don't have this in your hand, right? So the best way to keep this out of people's hands is substitute it with something like this. Great questions. Any others?
Thank you so much, Joshua, for commenting on these questions. We have 2-3 minutes left. So Malia is following up with her question since you highlighted the gains and value of gaming in education with neurodiverse students, as well as later on in employment. But as parents, many of them want to limit how much video games they play. Is this an expression of genius that should instead be encouraged?
So there's been a lot of studies on this. I think Malcolm Gladwell, I listen to podcasts, so Diary of a CEO, one of my favorites. Malcolm Gladwell just said on that, I think it was him, a couple hours is okay. But when it, just like anything else that becomes an obsession, if it interferes with them eating, if it interferes with them sleeping, if it interferes with them socializing, if it interferes with homework, then it's too much, just like any type of addiction. But if they were playing basketball for 2 hours a day and they were getting their exercise, or they were surfing for 2 hours a day and they were out getting sunshine exercise, would you discourage them? Maybe not. So we actually learn a ton from gaming in strategy and patterns and socializing, especially if they're talking with their friends. You just have to be careful to say, if this was a sport or if this was a musical instrument, how much time would I give them if that's where they get into their flow state?
Got it. Okay. Thank you so much, Joshua.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, we do have 1 more minute, and before you all go, we will be respectful of your time. Thank you so much for joining us. Before you go, please do not complete the short post survey that it's in the chat box. I will paste the link again in the chat box. As mentioned at the beginning, a recording of the session will be available after the event soon on our peer website, which the link will be shared with you by email as well. Thank you so much to everyone, and have a great rest of the day. Thank you, Joshua, again.
Thank you. Mahalo, everybody. Thank you.